The terrace at Lakeview Country Club overlooked 18 holes of manicured perfection. White tablecloths snapped in the April breeze, while servers in crisp uniforms navigated between tables of people who'd paid $60,000 annually for the privilege of eating overpriced crab cakes in the spring sunshine. I'd chosen a corner table, away from the main cluster of diners, close enough to be present, far enough to avoid forced conversation. My seafood salad sat half-finished while I reviewed contractor proposals on my tablet. The new medical complex in Riverside needed final approval on the HVAC system. Kate. Victoria's voice carried across 3 tables. What are you doing here? I looked up. My sister stood near the French doors leading from the clubhouse, flanked by 2 women in tennis whites. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a ponytail that probably cost more than most people's car payments, and her expression suggested she'd found something unpleasant on her shoe. Having lunch, I said simply. She walked over, her companions trailing behind like pilot fish. This is a members-only facility. I'm aware. I took a sip of water. You're not a member. Actually, I am. I gestured to the chair across from me. Would you like to sit down? I would not. Victoria's voice was rising. Other diners were starting to notice. How did you even get in here? Did you lie to the front desk? Use my name? I used my own name. Kate Morrison, same as yours. Her face flushed. This isn't funny. Lakeview has standards. There's a waiting list. You can't just, Victoria. I've been a member for 8 months. That's impossible. She turned to her friends. This is my younger sister. She works in property management. There's no way she could afford membership here. Property management. That's what she'd been telling people. Technically true. I managed properties. 43 commercial properties across 6 states to be precise. But Victoria had a way of making truth sound like diminishment. I assure you, I can afford it, I said. A server approached, clearly uncomfortable. Is everything all right, Miss Morrison? Which Miss Morrison are you addressing? Victoria snapped. I both of you. The young man looked like he wanted to sink through the terrace floor. Everything's fine, James, I said, reading his name tag. But I think my sister is confused about the membership roster. You forged documents, Victoria announced, loud enough that the table nearest us stopped eating entirely. Or you're using someone else's membership. That's fraud. That's James. Get Mr. Berkshire. Now. James hesitated. Ma'am. I really don't think. Security remove my sister from the premises. Victoria announced. The terrace went silent. Forks paused midair. Conversations died. Entire tables watched as 2 security guards approached my chair in silence, their footsteps heavy on the flagstones. I stood up gracefully, placing my membership card down on the white tablecloth. The platinum card caught the sunlight, physical proof that I'd paid my initiation fee, my annual dues, and my share of the recent capital assessment for the new pool house. Miss Morrison. The older guard looked genuinely pained. I'm going to have to ask you to. It's fine, Gerald. I smiled at him. We'd chatted several times when I'd come in for early morning swims. He was putting his daughter through nursing school. I understand this is awkward. She's refusing to leave, Victoria said triumphantly. Call the police if you need to. I want her arrested for trespassing. The club president rushed over from his table near the windows. Richard Thornton was 73, silver-haired, and had run Lakeview for the past decade with the precision of a military campaign. His family had been members since 1947. What's going on here? His voice cut through the murmuring crowd. Richard, thank God. Victoria touched his arm familiarly. She'd served on the social committee for 5 years. This woman is impersonating a member. She's my sister, and she's Miss Morrison. Richard said, looking directly at me. Why is someone attempting to eject our primary investor? Victoria's mouth snapped shut. There's been a misunderstanding, I said quietly. My sister wasn't aware of my membership status. Your membership? Richard's eyebrows rose. Miss Morrison, you're not just a member. You're the reason we still have a club at all. The terrace had gone from silent to absolutely frozen. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath. Richard, what are you talking about? Victoria's voice had lost its commanding edge. He looked at her with the kind of patience reserved for explaining something to a child. Your sister provided the emergency capital infusion that saved Lakeview from foreclosure 18 months ago. She's currently our largest single investor, holding approximately 37% of the club's restructured debt. I watched the color drain from Victoria's face. That's impossible, she whispered. Kate works in property management. Miss Morrison owns Morrison Property Group, Richard said. She manages commercial real estate across 6 states. When our previous ownership structure collapsed and the bank was preparing to foreclose, she stepped in with the necessary funding to keep us operational. One of Victoria's tennis friends made a small choking sound. The new pool house, Richard continued. The renovated locker rooms, the restaurant kitchen upgrade, all funded through Miss Morrison's capital contribution. We're gradually buying back her stake as our financial position stabilizes, but we're looking at a 7-year timeline minimum. 7 years, Victoria repeated numbly. She could have demanded board representation or operational control. Instead, she accepted standard investment terms and asked only for membership privileges, which frankly was extraordinarily generous given the leverage she held. I picked up my membership card and slipped it back into my wallet. Richard, this really isn't necessary. I think it is. His voice was gentle but firm. Victoria, your sister saved the club you love. The club where you play tennis every Tuesday. Where you chair the spring gala committee. Where you bring your friends for lunch. He gestured around the terrace. All of this exists because Kate stepped in when no one else would. Victoria was staring at me like I'd sprouted wings. You bought the country club. I invested in it. I corrected. There's a difference. The club is still member-owned, just with restructured financing that kept it from bankruptcy. But your shoe work in property management. I own a property management company, Morrison Property Group. We acquired our first commercial building 9 years ago. That office park in Riverside, where your dentist has his practice. We've grown steadily since then. The Morrison Property Group, one of Victoria's friends, Amanda something, I'd seen her at family holidays, was pulling out her phone. Oh my God, you own half of downtown. About a quarter, I said. And it's across multiple cities, not concentrated in one area. Diversification is important. But you drive a Honda, Victoria said weakly. A 2019 Accord. Excellent reliability ratings. Good fuel economy. Low maintenance costs. Why would I buy something more expensive? Because you can afford it. Affording something and needing it are different concepts. I sat back down and gestured to the chair across from me again. Victoria, do you want to sit? We should probably talk. She sank into the chair like her knees had given out. Gerald and the other security guard exchanged glances and retreated. Richard gave me a small nod and returned to his table, though I could see him watching from across the terrace. How long? Victoria's voice was barely audible. How long have you been running this company? Full-time. 9 years. But I started consulting while I was in college. Property owners needed someone who understood digital marketing and tenant relations. I was good at it, and I charged accordingly. You told me you were working as an apartment manager. I was managing an apartment complex, one that I'd purchased. You assumed I was an employee rather than the owner. I paused. To be fair, I didn't correct you. Why not? Would you have believed me? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Amanda was still scrolling through her phone. You own the Riverside Medical Plaza, and the Cornerstone Building, and oh my God, the whole Preston Heights development. That one's a partnership. I said. I own 40%. 2 other investors own 30% each. That development is worth millions. Amanda breathed. It's leveraged. I said. Commercial real estate is mostly about managing debt intelligently. But yes, on paper my portfolio is worth quite a bit. Victoria was gripping the edge of the table. And you just never mentioned this. Not at Thanksgiving. Not at Mom's birthday. Not ever. I mentioned it multiple times. You heard property management and stopped listening. You heard Honda Accord and made assumptions. You saw my apartment, that terrible place downtown, that rent-controlled 1-bedroom 3 blocks from my office, that lets me walk to work and save on transportation costs, while building my investment capital. Yes, that terrible place. I met her eyes. Victoria, you decided who I was when I was 22 and fresh out of college. You've never updated that assessment, because you never told me to. I told you I'd bought an office building. You laughed and asked if I meant a storage unit. I told you I was consulting for medical practices. You said that sounded boring. I told you I'd made a substantial investment. You asked if I meant my 401k. I kept my voice level, factual. After a while I stopped trying. The server James approached cautiously. Miss Morrison, can I get you anything? More water, perhaps some wine. Water's fine, thank you. And for you, Miss Morrison. He looked at Victoria. Vodka, she said faintly. Double. After he left, Victoria leaned forward. Why did you invest in the club? If you knew I was a member. If you knew She stopped. Oh God. You heard me, didn't you? Last Christmas, when I told Aunt Sarah you were working some dead-end job managing apartments. I heard. And you'd already bought half the club by then. Technically the investment closed in October. But I was already in negotiations when you said it. Yes. So this was revenge. Her voice rose again. You bought the country club to humiliate me. I invested in the country club because it was a sound financial opportunity. The property alone is worth substantially more than the purchase price. The membership base is stable, and the location is prime for long-term appreciation. I paused. The fact that you were a member was actually a complication, not a motivation. A complication. I had to structure the investment carefully to avoid any appearance of conflict of interest. I specifically requested that my involvement be kept confidential from general membership to avoid exactly this kind of situation. Then why? Board members know. Senior staff know. They have to, for fiduciary reasons. But I asked Richard to keep it quiet because I didn't want to make waves. I looked at her steadily. I wasn't trying to embarrass you, Victoria. I was trying to avoid being in the same room, while you continued to tell people I was a failure. She flinched. Around us the lunch crowd was pretending not to listen while absolutely listening. Phones were definitely out at several tables. This would be all over the club's gossip network within an hour. I'm sorry, Victoria said finally. I'm sorry for assuming, for dismissing you, She gestured helplessly at the scene we'd just created. For this, I appreciate that. Are you going to withdraw your investment because of what I did? No, that would hurt hundreds of members who have nothing to do with our family issues. It would hurt the staff who depend on this place for their livelihoods. And honestly, it's a good investment. I'm not going to tank a solid financial position because my sister and I had a public argument. Even though I tried to have you arrested. Even though I picked up my fork. My salad's getting warm. Do you want to stay for lunch, or would you prefer to go? I don't know if I can face everyone. They're going to talk regardless. Might as well let them see us having a civil conversation. It'll give them something new to discuss. She laughed. A slightly hysterical sound. You're handling this much better than I am. I've had 8 months to process being a country club investor. You've had 8 minutes to process being wrong about your sister's entire life. James returned with Victoria's vodka and a fresh water for me. Can I get either of you ladies anything else? I'll have what she's having, Victoria said, pointing at my half-eaten salad. And James, I'm sorry about earlier, about making a scene. It's no trouble, ma'am. He smiled and retreated. We sat in silence for a moment. The other diners were gradually returning to their own conversations, though I caught more than one person glancing our way. Morrison Property Group, Victoria said finally. That's really yours. Really mine. Started with one building. Grew from there. It's not glamorous work, mostly dealing with contractors, lease negotiations, building codes, tenant complaints, but it's stable, and it scales well. And you really drive a Honda, because of fuel economy, and because the maintenance costs are predictable. Commercial real estate has enough variables. I like my personal expenses to be simple. You're just like Dad, she said softly. He always said the best way to stay wealthy was to live like you weren't. Our father had died 5 years ago. He'd run a successful accounting firm, lived in a modest house, and left us both comfortable inheritances that Victoria had spent on her divorce settlement, and I'd rolled into my business. I miss him, I said. Me too. She took a sip of her vodka. He'd be proud of you, you know, of what you've built. Maybe. Definitely. He always said you had a head for numbers. She paused. I should have listened to him instead of making assumptions. My salad arrived. We ate in companionable silence for a while, letting the tension bleed out of the afternoon. So Victoria said eventually, "Are you going to tell Mom about this? About my business?" "She knows. Has for years." "She knows. We have lunch every other Wednesday." "Who do you think recommended me to the board when they were looking for investors?" Victoria's eyes widened. "Mom set this up. She mentioned the club was in trouble. I looked at the financials and made an offer. She didn't set it up so much as create an introduction. And she never told me. You never asked." I set down my fork. "Victoria, Mom and I talk about my work all the time. You just never join those conversations, because you've already decided what I do isn't interesting." She absorbed this. "I've been a terrible sister. You've been a sister who made assumptions. That's correctable." "Is it? We're having lunch right now, aren't we?" "That's a start." Richard approached our table, looking relieved. "Ladies, I'm glad to see you've worked things out. Miss Morrison, Kate, I wanted to apologize for the confrontation. If I'd realized what was happening sooner." "It's fine, Richard. These things happen. Still, I hope this won't affect your investment relationship with the club." "Not at all. Though I think we can probably drop the confidentiality clause now. The cat's out of the bag." He smiled. "I suspect you're right. Will you be staying for the board meeting Thursday?" "I'll be there." After he left, Victoria looked at me. "You attend board meetings. Investment stakes above 30%. Get automatic board observer status." "I don't vote, but I attend to protect my financial interest." "Of course you do." She shook her head, smiling slightly. "I have so many questions, and I have another meeting at 3. But we could do this again. Lunch. Next week maybe." "I'd like that." She paused. "And Kate, thank you for not making this worse than it had to be. You could have destroyed me up there." "You're my sister. I don't want to destroy you. I just want you to see me." "I see you now," she said quietly. Finally, we finished our lunch while the spring breeze carried the sound of golf carts and distant conversation across the terrace. Around us, Lakeview Country Club continued its daily operations, saved from bankruptcy by an investment most members would never know about. But Victoria knew now, and somehow, that felt like enough.